What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the A-Game.
Join us as we recap this week in App State sports and follow us on Instagram at the A-Game Sports for weekly updates on all App State sporting news and the latest on-set action.
Mountaineer Spotlight host Jay Boyd joins us right here in the studio. And stay tuned as we crown this week's Player of the Week.
I'm Gray Salter.
And I'm Austen Lopp.
And this is
the A-Game.
Jay Boyd here for Mountaineer Spotlight, and we're in the studio again this week with Gray and Austen talking Mountaineer football. They just had a scrimmage this past weekend. What was the look of that? Talking men's and women's basketball. We'll start off with that. Men's basketball just fired their leader for the past 4 years in Jim Fox. What do you see for the future for App State men's basketball?
Right, so Gray and I talked about this a little bit last week. It seemed to be that the issue came around that even though Jim Fox was handed an interesting situation when he came here to App State, they were switching conferences. They were coming through some of these NCAA indictments that they had going on. He created the image of academic excellence, but the winning element never came along. And I think that we really came to the point here in Boone where, especially last year, he has his best season, goes 500, has 5 of his 7 top scoring people come back. And then we go 11 for 21 this year. It was really disappointing, and I think a lot of people saw it coming. They had to buy him out on his contract, but it needed to happen. It was about that time.
I tend to think Jim Fox did really well in the recruiting realm. I mean, you think about Ronshad Shabazz was a recruit for Fox, one of the better players to ever play at App State. Justin Forrest, Isaac Johnson, Tyrell Johnson. I mean, I think there's a lot of talent on that roster, and some of that talent is carrying forward. I'm hoping that they can find a coach that wants to gel with the guys who are here already and doesn't want a clean sheet in a new roster, basically, of his own guys. I mean, obviously, he's going to want to implement some of his new recruits, but it'd be nice for them to be able to find a fit for a person who wants to maybe try to adapt to the guys that are already here, not so much maybe bringing in as many new people right off the bat. With that being said, I think part of what made Jim Fox not a great fit for Appalachian was his coaching style was very, to me, it just seemed very upfront. It was get the ball to your best players, and we're going to run a lot of isolation and screens and try to have them score. I might like to see App State go for a coach that isn't maybe so typical. Not that he necessarily has a typical coaching style in that, it's the same as everybody else's, but you're watching March Madness right now. You're seeing teams come out with all these different looks and these different defenses and ways to score the basketball. And I just feel like Appalachian State, we never really saw that this year. It was a lot of the same stuff that we've seen over the past couple of years. And for me, I'd like to see them maybe bring in a fresh mind who can take the talent that they've got here, but put a twist on it. Get something going that's just not so basic and that's not something that we've just been running over and over again for the last 4 or 5 years.
You spoke on Fox's ability to recruit and how he brought in Shabazz. Do you think that hurt him? Because the thing that we've always heard about Jim Fox from his past is at Davidson, he had Stephen Curry. Do you think that past with an NBA player like that hurt him in coaching Shabazz and the rest of those guys because he leans so heavily on Shabazz?
It's hard to think that maybe it hurts him because you'd have to say the opportunity to coach a player like that, like Steph Curry or an NBA caliber basketball player, I mean, you never want to turn down that opportunity. That's going to get you good experience. For me, I think Jim Fox just had issues in those are his guys. He recruited those guys, and you put a lot of pride and you put a lot of faith in that. And Ronshad Shabazz and Justin Forrest, no doubt, were the 2 best players on that team, but the way that the looks were created for them, for me, was just a little too much of what I've seen before. And watching all these teams right now, like I said, especially in March Madness, we're seeing guys who teams have prepared weeks for now or days now for in getting ready to play them, and coaches have to come up with other ways for those guys to score. And we're seeing that now, and I think Appalachian State needs a mind like that, somebody who's willing to reach into the bag and pull out some new tricks to get guys like Justin Forrest, who's coming back, and Isaac Johnson more buckets and just more opportunities.
Distribution of the ball definitely helps you this time of the year.
I completely agree with Gray. When you come to, if you ask Ron Shadd or you ask Justin Forrest, these guys, they don't mind being the guys that are lent on. They came in, they knew what they needed to do when they got to Boone. They're totally fine. But they had to have some support. Gray hit it on the head when he said that you have to prepare and make these guys score. And that's what a coach's job is supposed to be. That is what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to get these guys in and scoring. And when you just kind of hand them the ball and say, all right, just take it up. I mean, we saw it time and time again, especially in close games. It just kind of seemed like they were told to just let it happen and see what could get going. And that's just not going to work. You know, like Grace said, with March Madness, you see these guys, Zion Williamson, these guys that teams are preparing for. You also have to prepare for teams to prepare for your guys. And when you're doing the exact same thing every week, they know what you're going to do. They know who's going to take that shot. They know how they're going to get that shot. It's just not going to work. So I would love to see somebody come in here who has a little bit of a trick up his sleeve, you know. Definitely keep what you got going well. Towards the end of the season, we said this team can still work, even without Ron Shadd. This team can still work, but he brings in a couple of his guys, whoever we get. He brings in a couple of his guys. He makes it work with our guys, and we could become a really crafty team, I feel. So that's kind of where I'm leaving it at.
Jay, for me, it's this. If you're not willing to adapt today in basketball, football, whatever the sport is, if you're not willing to adapt as a head coach, you're not going to succeed because everybody's going to be throwing different stuff at you, and everybody else is willing to adapt. So you have to be also. And of course, Jim Fox took measures and had adaptability, but I'm looking for the next App State basketball coach to have a lot of adaptability. Maybe that's something they focus on a little more than they did in their past coaching hiring process. I mean, just somebody who's just not typical. I'd like to see a fresh mind for App State basketball.
And while men's basketball is searching for their new leader and a head coach, the women's basketball team, the other team that plays at the Holmes Convocation Center, will be there tomorrow to play the Marshall Thundering Herd, a team that they clobbered earlier in the season by 22. What are you looking forward to out of that game?
Defense was a story in that last game when they played Marshall early on in the season. They had only 2 players score 10 or more points. 15 points and 11 points were their 2 highs for that game from a Marshall individual. So I think defense is going to be a big factor in that game on Monday night. And just playing their game, shooting-wise against Asheville, they struggled a little bit. They were a little shaky from the field. I think they shot just under 50%. And then I know from three-point, they were like 6 for 20. From the free throw line, they were 7 for 15. That's something they have to tighten up big time, especially when you get into close games, fouls at the end of the game. You want to be able to make those free throws. So I think defense is going to ultimately win them that game, but they have to be careful. They need to be good at the line and just make sure they're playing their own basketball. The further you get in a tournament, the more pressure starts to get put on your shoulders, and you just got to find a way to play your game.
I agree. I think, like Grace said, defense is extremely important. Bailey Plummer only scored 3 points against UNCA, but she had 13 rebounds and 2 blocks. She built a wall in the paint and was able to control it. I think that's huge. Maddie Story's going to get hers. Bree Stanley's going to get hers. You know, all these people. Ashley Polasek, she's going to get hers. And so you just have to protect that paint. You hit it on the head again when you said free throws. App State shot 47% from free throw line, and Marshall averages 79% on the season. That's not a winning matchup. You're going to have to improve there. There's just a lot of different things that you can look at and say that these are places that we can get better. App State averages, I think, 0.6 more points on the season than Marshall does. So you gotta win that offensive battle. They average 8. They allow 8 more points than Marshall does. So you have to be able to stop them. It's just things like that. Break down your game. You're at this point in the season, you're in the preseason. We just talked about switching it up a little, or the postseason, excuse me. We just talked about switching it up a little bit, but at this point, you've got what you need to go. They're 5-0 in the Women's Basketball Invitational. So, you know, obviously they're doing something right, all time, I mean. So obviously they know what they're doing. They're ready to play, and I think that this team is ready to get a postseason championship.
One thing I'll say on that too, Jay, they need to get out to a hot start.
Mm-hmm.
The women in the previous game against Marshall, I believe they outscored Marshall by 7 in the first period of play, and that got them out in front. Marshall ended up outscoring them in 2 of the other 3 periods, and App only outscored Marshall, I think, by 1 in the other period. So Marshall actually played probably a more complete basketball game in their first matchup, even though App State blew them out, because in the first period they already jumped out to such a big lead that it made it tough for Marshall to ever really do anything about it In the UNC Asheville game, it was the exact same way. App State opened up that game to like a 19-7 run, and that was the end of the very first period of play. They were up by that much. And then Asheville ended up outscoring App in the last period of that game pretty handily. Free throw's a big part of that, but because App State had jumped out to that early lead, it put their opponent in too big a hole to come back. If they can, in the home center, with that energy rocking, come out in that first period and really throw a punch, knock them in the mouth, and just show that this is their house and it's tournament time and they're going to compete, that could set the tone for the game, and that could be the difference in when that team makes a late run. It's not enough. They've already gotten out to that early lead.
Right, and just to back that up, App State is 5-0 in games decided by 5 or less points. So that is, like, ending games is not their problem. UNCAA caught up to App twice in the fourth quarter in the last game. Ending these games is not their problem. Gray is completely right. You have got to start hot, because if you don't go on one of those big runs and they're able to consistently catch up to you like that, you're just going to be in a world of hurt.
And at Kid Brewer, this past weekend, the football team actually had an open scrimmage, invited everybody out to come see what the team would look like as they look to end spring practice here soon. And the offense had no answer for the App State defense. App State defense dominates. There were a couple picks out there. Guys like Josh Johnson and wow, I'm blanking.
No, it's okay. Safeties, though.
Yeah,
Safeties, corners.
we got you.
Secondary, I got you.
Defensive backs had a fantastic outing yesterday.
Are you even surprised, though? I mean, come on.
No.
I mean, we might be losing a couple of guys from the Legion of Boom, but I do not think we have any issues. They're looking
Maybe on the
nice.
outside we're missing a couple guys, but on that back end, those safeties are going to have a day.
Oh, believe me, too. I mean, if you don't think that Clifton Duck and Tay Hayes' influence on the guys behind them hasn't been huge, and that those guys aren't ready, too.
They preach that.
Yeah, you're wrong. I mean, the guys who've been behind them, that's not how it's been in their head. It's a next man up mentality.
Exactly.
Those guys are ready to go this year as much as they were ready to go off the bench last year.
And Jordan Fair was the one that I was looking for earlier. He is going to dominate
He's a monster.
defensively next year.
Absolute
I think he's
monster.
going to be ridiculous on the defensive side for the Mountaineers. So their defense looked really good, and I think the offense will continue to tune it up and make some transitions. They're going to have a lot of woes as they get through the spring. They have an offensive head coach, but they'll be okay.
You have to consider, too, I mean, obviously new systems being implemented on both sides of the ball with the whole new coaching staff. Offense is going to be so rocky at first when you implement a new system like that. Defense,
moving the ball is tough.
It's a lot quicker shift for a defense than it is for an offense. Timing is everything. Your communication on both sides of the ball is obviously very important, but on an offensive, in an offensive scheme, timing in football is huge, and the ability to communicate and put all that together is super, super important. I'm not surprised that the spring scrimmage looked like that. I was kind of expecting that. Plus, defense has been App State's strong suit in the past anyway. So I'm really not surprised by that. But I did, Jay, I mean, you were there. I was not. I didn't have the fortune of being there. But I kind of wanted to ask you the question of, did it seem to you like the offense was struggling based on the system, like they were confused and they didn't know what was going on, or was it legitimately that the defense was just hounding them and they couldn't get the system going because of that? I mean, maybe a little of both, but I'm kind of wondering if it seemed like it was more confusion or if it was more, wow, the defense looks really good.
So I show up a little bit early. I want to get a good spot, thinking like there might be a little bit of a crowd. There honestly wasn't that big of a crowd, but I get in a good position and I'm watching the offensive side of the field, getting a look at Zach Thomas, Darrynton Evans, Corey Sutton, some names that we're familiar with. And it looks like they're moving through the 7-on-7 stuff pretty quickly. I don't see like they're having trouble getting through the scheme or that they're struggling with play calls or anything like that. And same thing when they go 11 for 11 during the scrimmage. I'm thinking they're moving pretty smoothly for them to be putting in a new offensive system. So I will say I think it is the defense, because there were a lot of sacks. That defensive line was swarming all day. And the secondary, as App State has been a great secondary these last few years, continued the call yesterday.
That's extremely comforting for me, because I get callbacks to what happened against Georgia Southern. Zach Thomas goes down and our offense shuts down. And the defense played well in that game, but it's good to know that now we have this defense that can just control a game no matter what we need them to do. These guys are strong, they're tough, and I cannot wait for football season.
I would say, real quick to wrap up, another bright spot from that too is the fact that when you think about who's returning to this team from last season's roster, most of the names you think of actually come from the offensive side of things. And you think about running back Darrynton Evans, quarterback Zach Thomas, Corey Sutton on the outside. Almost the entire receiving cast is back. The offensive line misses a couple names here and there. But when you think about the power players who are returning, obviously Fair on the defensive side of things and some of the guys in the safety position on that secondary. But you consider a lot of the heavy hitters for App State, the guys with experience that were vital to last year's team, they're on offense. And so if the defense looks good in that spring scrimmage, then they're only going to trend up because that offense isn't getting any worse.
Offensive coach calling the shots. We have a long way to go. Good looking. We're looking good. I'm excited.
I think we'll be all right.
The drink era.
Thank you guys for sitting down with me this week. After a break, we recap this week in App State sports. Stay tuned.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
Appalachian State women's basketball team continues their season in the Women's Basketball Invitational, where they earned their first postseason win in the Angel Eldricken era, defeating UNC Asheville 57-55. 18 points for Maddie Story and a defensive wall built in the paint named Bailey Plummer helped earn the close win for the Mountaineers that was perhaps best described by Coach Eldricken as a gritty win for the team. The Mountaineers bring their talents back to Boone this Monday against Conference USA opponent Marshall. The Mountaineers already defeated the Thundering Herd 72-54.
App State Wrestling took the stage at the NCAA Championships this week. Mountaineers Cody Russell and Kerry Miller both lost in the first round, but won their consolation matches in order to advance to Day 2 of the tournament. Regardless of the outcomes, we're proud of our wrestlers for all they have accomplished this year.
App State women's tennis defeated South Alabama 4-2 in an impressive performance on Friday, handing the Jaguars their first loss in the Sun Belt Conference. The Mountaineers then went on to beat Troy on Sunday, earning their second Sun Belt sweep of the season. App State will play its final 2 road matches this weekend against Louisiana Lafayette and Louisiana Monroe.
The App State track and field teams competed at the Winthrop Invitational this weekend. Mountaineer Tristan Shaver placed first in the pole vault, beating the second place mark by nearly a foot. The men's 4x100 meter relay team won their competition with a time of 41 seconds. App State took 2 of the top 8 spots in the women's 5,000 meter run, with Samantha Kolor finishing 3rd and Erin Jamison finishing 7th. The Mountaineers will return to competition this weekend at the Raleigh Relays and the Pepsi Florida Relays on March 29th and March 30th.
App State women's golf took 5th place at the Low Country Intercollegiate Tournament last weekend. The Mountaineers were led by senior Juliana Elias, who finished 7 over par to earn a share of 9th place in the individual awards. App State will return to action on March 25th and 26th at the UNC Asheville Invitational.
App State baseball lost last week's series against Georgia State, losing 2 out of the 3 games in their Sun Belt Conference opener. The Panthers took Game 1 in a pitcher's duel that ended 2-0 after 9 innings. The Mountaineers managed to tie the series in Game 2, but fell 17-6 in 8 innings in the final game. App State returned to action against North Carolina Central on Tuesday, dominating the Eagles in a 13-0 victory at home.
App State softball swept Louisiana Monroe last weekend, continuing their best start in school history with back-to-back Sun Belt Series sweeps. The Mountaineers held ULM to 0 runs in Game 1, defeating the Warhawks 3-0. Game 2 was a bit closer, requiring extra innings before App State ultimately got the 4-2 victory. In the final game of the series, App State once again held Monroe to 0 runs, finishing the sweep with a 5-0 win. The Mountaineers returned to action on Wednesday, defeating East Tennessee State 7-1 here in Boone.
After the break, we have an interview with App State running back Darrynton Evans, a brand new Q&A game, and then we'll crown this week's Player of the Week. Stay tuned.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
Hey, how are you today?
today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Very good. So are you excited for March Madness?
Yeah, it's my favorite time of year.
Yeah, I'm really pumped about it. I love, especially coming from Raleigh, North Carolina, I love how exciting it is with all the ACC teams. So I really love what's going on.
I've never been more excited for anything in my whole life.
Of course, excited. First day, 12 o'clock, games all day.
Did you fill out a bracket?
I did, too, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, of course I did. Love doing that.
Yes, I'm actually in 3 different groups and have 5 different brackets.
Wow, okay. So who do you have in the championship?
My main pick is Duke and Carolina, and I'm picking Duke.
Probably my biggest upset is probably Ohio State over Iowa State. I feel like Iowa State always loses in the first round. And then later on, I have Maryland beating LSU. I know LSU is kind of hot right now, but I feel like Maryland could really do it. So
Nothing major. I think Texas Tech is a really good team that people aren't talking about. Other than that, it's mostly the 1s and 2 seeds.
I'm going 2 rounds of upset with Murray State, former Appalachian State coach Matt McMahon at the helm there. And so I'm riding the Racers for a few rounds of upset.
I'm hoping Duke loses by the Final Four because I just don't like Duke. And other than that, I have Oregon going pretty far too, and they're like a 12th seed. So
I have Virginia Tech beating Duke and Kansas State losing.
Why do you have Virginia Tech beating Duke?
Because I hate Duke.
Awesome. Who do you have in the championship game?
Carolina versus Michigan State University.
I have a UNC Duke national champion.
The UNC and Gonzaga.
I've got UNC and Michigan.
Oh, that's a good choice. Good choice.
I have North Carolina playing against, I can't remember who they're playing against, honestly, but North Carolina.
Do you have them winning?
I do.
Okay.
I'm here with my boy Darrynton Evans, my teammate.
Live.
We're gonna just go 100 yards, ask him a couple questions, get to know him a little bit better.
Let's get it.
All right, so you were first team Sun Belt Championship MVP, bowl win, Sun Belt champion. What's your favorite accolade you got from last year, you think?
I would probably say being all conference for running back from not really being a starter the whole year. Like, it was kind of surprising to still make first team.
I got you. And with JJ going down, unfortunately, how did you adapt to just becoming that starter, and what was y'all's relationship like?
I would say our relationship, it kind of got tighter because, the running back room, we already a close group, but, once he went down, me, Mark Will, Cam Peoples, and Shot, we all told each other, like, we got to pick up slack and keep it moving.
I got you. Obviously, there's a coaching change this year. How's the team adjusting to the coaching change, and how has the spring been so far, if you could tell us?
I say we're adjusting pretty well. Any good team that wants to be great has to adapt to stuff. Change is bound to happen, but I would say spring is going pretty well. They're doing a good job installing stuff at a good pace to where it's not overwhelming. It's a decent amount.
All right, we're at the 50-yard line, so we're going to switch up the questions a little bit and go a little bit more rapid fire. What's your favorite movie?
Scarface.
Got you. And who's the funniest person on the team?
Whew, man. It depends on what day it is. I'd probably say Sherm, and then you still got Zarion,
I got you. All right, pre-game music. You can only listen to 5 artists. Who you picking?
Oh, easy. Meek Mill, Lil Durk, Roddy Ricch, probably throwing a Lil Baby. Who else? I might throw in Lil Gunna.
I got you. And we know you're a big video game guy. What's your favorite video game out right now?
2K.
2K?
Yeah, I'm like that.
Not trying to see me.
Come on.
Who's the best dancer on the team?
Cam Peoples.
Favorite food?
Man, I like seafood, any type of seafood, crabs, fish.
Best seafood in Florida. Florida boy.
In Florida, like my mom, what she'll do like a fish fry. She'll fry the fish, fry the shrimp, baked beans, grits, all that.
That's 100 yards. Might have to come over to the crib, see what your mama talking about.
Bet.
That's it.
And now it's time for our Player of the Week.
Our Player of the Week this week has played a crucial role in the App State women's basketball team's postseason run. She was selected to the Sun Belt All-Tournament team and has contributed much in the Women's Basketball Invitational. We're, of course, talking about sophomore guard Pri Stanley.
Pri scored 15 points and had 4 rebounds against UNC Asheville, including the go-ahead three-pointer with minute 20 left on the clock to advance Appalachian to the second round of the Women's Basketball Invitational. Pre averaged 10.4 points per game this season and shot at a 38.6% mark.
That's pretty impressive from Pre Stanley, but that's going to do it for this week's episode of The A-Game. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to give us a follow on Instagram at The A-Game Sports for all the latest A-Game content. Wrapping up here in the studio, I'm Gray Salter.
And I'm Austen Lobb. Join us again next week. Thanks for watching, guys.